Hello, YouTubers, and welcome to the Cold Sports Takes of the They Are the Greatest Team in NFL History. This is a recap of the football teams that dominate the NFL through their respective season, while showcasing the greatest players and greatest coaches. This segment provides each team case for the greatest team in NFL history. With that being said, let's begin. The 1985 Chicago Bears. No one can say the NFL wasn't warned. After Mike Ditka took over the Bears in 1982, the team quickly improved, and by 1984 they reached the NFC Championship Game. It was time for the breakthrough, and the 1985 Chicago Bears did just that, winning the Super Bowl with a defense at the forefront of any conversation about the best Ds of all time. Chicago's defense was anchored by middle linebacker Mike Singletary, a future Hall of Famer, who won the first of two Defensive Player of the Year honors. The defensive front had two first-team All-Pros in Steve McMichael and Richard Dent, the latter recording 17 sacks. Defensive end Dan Hampton was another Pro Bowl player, and the team broke in hefty William the Refrigerator Perry, and he had 5 sacks from his defensive tackle spot. Singletary was joined at linebacker by Pro Bowler Otis Wilson and his 10.5 sacks. Wilbur Marshall, an explosive player in his own right, had 6 sacks. A future two-time NFL Coach of the Year, Ron Rivera was also a part of the linebacking corps. The front seven is what is most remembered about this defense, for the relentless pressure brought by colorful defensive coordinator Buddy Ryan. But the secondary was pretty good itself. Dave Durson was a Pro Bowler at strong safety. Fan favorite Gary Fensick was the free safety, and two more future head coaches, Leslie Frazier and Jeff Fisher, were in the secondary. It was a defense for the ages, one that not only did the basics of stopping opponents but intimidated them with the constant pressure. But the offense of the '85 Bears is often overlooked. The fact that this offense was the second best in the league in points scored is one of those under-the-radar stats in NFL history. A healthy Jim McMahon was the key. The quarterback started 11 games, which for him was a display of endurance. McMahon's 57% completion rate and 7.6 yards per attempt were solid by the standards of the time, and he made the Pro Bowl. McMahon did a great talent at wide receiver. Willie Gault had world-class sprinter speed and could stretch defenses, with 33 catches and 704 yards. Dennis McKinnon and tight end Emery Moorhead were functional targets. The great Walter Payton had another stellar season in his legendary career in 1985 for the Chicago Bears. The future Hall of Famer ran the ball 324 times for 1,551 rushing yards and scored 9 rushing touchdowns. The defense didn't look historically great in the opener. The opponent was the worst team in the league, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Bears were in a 28-17 halftime hole. Frazier turned the tide in the third quarter with a 29-yard interception return for a touchdown, and Chicago took over the second half in a 38-28 win. Payton ran for 120 yards and McMahon was 23-34 for 274 yards. 1 week later the defense made its real debut. The New England Patriots had a strong running game that they would ultimately ride to the Super Bowl themselves, led by Craig James. Chicago held the Patriots to 27 rush yards. The Bears were up 20-0 late in the game, and only a relatively fluky 90-yard touchdown pass to James on a swing pattern cost them a shutout. Thursday night football was not the norm in 1985, so the Bears' trip to the Twin Cities to play the Vikings was a special one. McMahon was having his first injury problems and did not start due to a kidney problem. But he would certainly finish. The Bears did not play well offensively and were down 17-9 in the third quarter. McMahon was summoned in relief. He threw a 79-yard touchdown pass to Gault, and 2 more TD passes to McKinnon from 25 and 43 yards. McMahon's 8 completions went for 236 yards, and he delivered a 33-24 win. Chicago had eliminated the Washington Redskins in the divisional playoffs the year before. This Redskin team wouldn't make the postseason, though they did finish the season 10-6. After spotting the Skins a 10-zip lead, the Bears unleashed. Gault took a kickoff 99 yards to the house, and the route was on, 45-10. A return visit to Tampa Bay was next. Chicago was again sloppy against a terrible team, and this time it was the offense. They were down 12-3 at the half, but a 147-27 edge in rushing yardage eventually took over and the Bears won 27-19. The big test was up next. They would travel to San Francisco, where they had lost the NFC Championship game the prior year. Peyton ran for an early touchdown, starting a day where he rushed for 132 yards. The Bears added 3 field goals in the second quarter and took a 16-0 lead. The defense was locked in, even though the 49ers' own D got a pick six and cut the lead to 16-10, Chicago calmly reasserted control and won 26-10. Chicago was now 6-0 and had dismantled both the 49ers and Redskins, who had combined to represent the NFC in the last 3 Super Bowls. Having established themselves as the team to beat in 1985, the Bears were ready to have some fun. The mediocre Green Bay Packers came to Soldier Field for Monday Night Football. With the game tied 7-7 in the second quarter, the Bears were on the doorstep of taking the lead. Instead of giving the ball to Peyton or fullback Matt Suhey, Ditka inserted Perry into the backfield. The big 340-pounder bowled into the end zone. The legend of the refrigerator was born and Madison Avenue was at least as happy as Bears Nation. The fact it was a sloppy game, 9 combined turnovers, or that Peyton had turned in another vintage performance, with 112 yards, or even that the Bears were still undefeated after the 23-7 win, all were dwarfed in news coverage by the fridge. Wilson led the way in a home win over Minnesota, intercepting 2 passes and returning 1 to the house. It was part of a 5-interception day for the defense and combined with Peyton's 118 rush yards, produced an easy 27-0 win. Ditka clearly enjoyed tormenting Green Bay with his new toy because with the money on the table, he slipped the fridge out of the backfield. He was wide open in the end zone and though Perry hardly looked comfortable on the catch he made it and the Bears won 16-10. The Bears had a 2-game lead on the Los Angeles Rams for the top seed in the NFC, while the Dallas Cowboys and New York Giants were each 7-3. It set up another statement game opportunity in Dallas, a late afternoon kick for a national audience. And what a statement it was. Dent intercepted a pass on the goal line for a quick touchdown. Defensive back Mike Richardson brought back another pick 36 yards for a score. It was 17-0 by the second quarter. Peyton ran for 132 yards and the result was a 44-0 avalanche that put the Bears on the cover of Sports Illustrated. Another shutout highlighted by defensive touchdowns came with a 36-0 rout of lowly Atlanta. Fensick had a 22-yard interception return and Frazier brought 132 yards to the house. The Falcons' passing numbers were 317 for 16 yards. They had fewer passing yards than pass attempts. Different era or not, this was mind-boggling and the Bears were 12-0. The nation was abuzz for a Monday night date in Miami. The Dolphins had won the AFC title in 1984, would win a good AFC East again this season and had one of the top quarterbacks in football in Dan Marino. His quick release gave him a chance to solve the 46 defense, the Ryan scheme. Even though they sacked Marino 6 times, the fear of the quarterback's big play capacity were well-founded. He completed only 14 passes in 27 attempts but they went for 270 yards. Fuller threw 2 interceptions and the Bears dug a 31-10 halftime hole. They lost 38-24. The legacy of the 1972 Miami Dolphins as the only unbeaten team was safe, but the 1985 Chicago Bears would create their own legacy. The Super Bowl shuffle might have been audacious, but it had good intentions, proceeds for Chicago's needy, and it was tremendous fun. The combination of good intentions and good humor mean that someone in today's NFL would undoubtedly quash it immediately. The Bears closed out their 15-1 season with a 37-17 win in Detroit, keyed by 7 turnovers, a defensive touchdown from Rivera and a 94-yard kickoff return for Dennis Gentry. It was time for the playoffs and the first opponent was a team cut in the same mold as the Bears. Bill Parcells was producing a terrific defense for the New York Giants, led by Lawrence Taylor. The winds were blowing off Lake Michigan and in the first quarter the result was an almost unthinkable play. Punter Sean Landeta received the snap at his own 5-yard line, and completely whiffed. Sean Gale recovered for the Bears and scored the gift touchdown. That was the only score of the first half, but McMahon stepped up in the third quarter. He threw touchdown passes to McKinnon of 23 and 20 yards. It was part of a solid 11-21 for 216 yards and no interceptions day for McMahon. Meanwhile, Payton was able to grind out 93 yards on 27 carries against the tough New York defense. And Chicago's own D was in playoff form. The forced Phil Simms into an erratic 14-35 for 209 yards game and held shifty running back Joe Morris to 32 yards. The 21-0 score stood up and the Bears were back in the NFC Championship Game. 1985 was a different year and the Los Angeles Rams were the number 2 seed, led by one of the great running backs of all time in Eric Dickerson, fresh off an NFL playoff record 248 yards in a win over Dallas. Chicago was still a 10.5-point favorite, as the Rams lacked any passing threat to open things up for Dickerson. McMahon made a rare display of his legs, running 16 yards for a touchdown, and another drive ended with a Butler field goal. It was 10-0 and when the Rams showed poor clock management at the end of the first half and failed to get any points, the game might as well have been called. The running games were a non-factor, ironic in that two all-time greats in Dickerson and Payton were ineffective. Chicago also held Los Angeles quarterback Dieter Brock to 10-31 for 66 yards. McMahon was the difference, 16-25 for 164 yards in an efficient performance. He threw a 22-yard touchdown pass to Galt for a 17-0 lead, and Marshall sealed the game in the fourth quarter with a 52-yard fumble return. Another shutout, this 124-zip had the Bears in the Super Bowl for the first time. New England made a Cinderella run through the AFC from the 5 seed, becoming the first team to win 3 straight road games to reach the Super Bowl. It was a bit of a letdown, a lot of fans had hoped the Raiders, with Marcus Allen, would be the opponent. Even more wanted a Chicago-Miami rematch. But the Patriots took out these teams, the 1-2 seeds in Chicago was installed as a healthy 10-point favorite in New Orleans. There was little pre-game discussion of whether the Bears would actually lose the football game. There was more talk centered on whether they could spin a third straight postseason shutout. But rather than this series giving hope for New England, it almost seemed to underscore how hopeless their task was. The Chicago defense simply forced a quick 3-and-out before the field goal and there was absolutely nothing to suggest the Patriots could move the football. And the Bears were about to get started. 2 long drives into the red zone resulted in field goals and a 6-3 lead. Late in the first quarter, Suhey ran from 11 yards out for a 13-3 cushion. Meanwhile, Patriot quarterback Tony Eason had a deer-in-the-headlights look and he would become the only Super Bowl starting QB to not complete a pass, being yanked for Steve Grogan after 6 incompletions. It didn't matter. McMahon scored on a 2-yard run and Butler kicked another short field goal. It was 20-3 at the half and could have been worse if not for the turnover and the missed red zone opportunities. Another QB keeper from McMahon followed by defensive back Reggie Phillips scoring on a 28-yard pick-6 removed any lingering doubt as to the outcome of this game. McMahon would finish the game 12-20 for 256 yards. Those are numbers that normally make a Super Bowl winning quarterback the game MVP, but not on a day when the defense is making such a resounding closing statement. Chicago's D recorded 7 sacks and forced 6 turnovers. They scored on both the Phillips interception and a fourth-quarter safety. Dent finished with a 1.5 sacks and got the honor of game MVP. The final was 46-10. With the dominant win, the 1985 Chicago Bears earned their place in NFL history. In the comment section, let me know about your take on the 1985 Bears.